I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you can find all we do at undergroundusa.com. First, let me state this for the record so no one can try to manipulate my words. The murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson is nothing short of an act of murder. I condemn the act and hope the perpetrator is apprehended and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, left to the justice meted out by a jury of his or her peers. I also extend my sincere condolences to Mr. Thompson's family and close friends. That said, it would be wise to examine the possible motives that spurred the shooter to engage in murder in the taking of another human being's life. The security camera footage of the shooting is chilling, even in a world where violence is overglorified in the entertainment industries. The shooter, calculated and cold in his simplicity, stalked Thompson and very simply pulled the trigger 3 times. Investigators have discovered that etched onto the bullet casings found at the murder scene were the words deny, defend, and depose. These words are eerily similar to the title of the book Delay, Deny, Defend, which discusses why insurance companies don't pay claims and what you can do about it. The book is a critical examination of the insurance industry in the United States, delving into how insurance companies often operate through strategies encapsulated by its title. Insurers often use delaying tactics to slow the claims process, hoping claimants will give up or settle for less. When that doesn't work, they often reject claims, even valid ones, by finding any reason not to pay out. And if those 2 tactics don't work, many, if not most, insurers will proceed to litigation, aggressively defending and leveraging their resources to outlast or outspend the policyholder. The book's author uses numerous examples and case studies to illustrate these practices, highlighting how they affect individuals and the broader economy and society. He argues that these strategies prioritize profit over policyholder welfare, often at the expense of those who have paid for coverage expecting protection in times of need. The book also explores regulatory failures and suggests reforms to make the insurance industry more equitable and consumer-friendly. So it's reasonable to speculate that the shooter was adversely affected by the health insurance industry and decided, like the character Howard Beale in the movie Network, that he was mad as hell and wasn't going to take it anymore. Of course, this wouldn't rationalize an act of murder, and it certainly doesn't excuse it. But who hasn't had a run-in with a health insurance company and ended up enraged or disgusted? At every turn, there seems to be a loophole or a fine print caveat that excludes what an insured patient needs or saddles him or her with co-pays that are just about as expensive as paying out of pocket. Then there's the ugly alliance between the health insurance industry and Big Pharma. Insurance companies influence drug costs through their formulary, a list of insurance-covered medications. Big Pharma often colludes with insurers to ensure their drugs are included in these formularies through financial incentives or exclusive deals, which usually aren't in the best interest of patients or based on the drug's effectiveness. Further, there have been legal actions regarding price fixing and collusion in drug pricing, where insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies agree on pricing strategies that limit competition and keep prices artificially high. For example, the average price for a 30-day supply, usually 60 tablets, of the anticoagulant medication Eliquis is approximately $185 in Canada. In the United States, where we're told we have a superior healthcare system, the list price for a 30-day supply is approximately $594. That's a $409 difference. The average price in Mexico is approximately $85. This translates to slightly more than $1 per pill. In the United States, the land where the U.S. federal government tried to mandate health insurance for all, each tablet of Eliquis costs approximately $9.90. That's just one medication. Now use that as a loose baseline in contemplating how the costs of other medications and medical procedures are affected by this unholy alliance. Consider this. One report of cost inflation after an emergency room visit detailed a case where a $629 bill was issued, with $7 attributed to a Band-Aid, and the rest to the facility fee for emergency services. In another example, the cost of a Band-Aid was part of a $478 bill for a minor injury treatment. The retail price of a Band-Aid is anywhere from 5 cents to 50 cents. Then there are plain old visits to a doctor. The average non-insurance out-of-pocket cost for a visit to the doctor in 2024 is anywhere from $150 to $300 for a basic visit. In 2000, that same visit cost $61. In 1980, it cost $14. These costs are based on data from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. But what about major life-threatening illnesses and how health insurance companies issue payments to cover those? Let's use the scariest example for most people, cancer. And please remember, this is a generalization, so numbers are to be understood as approximate references. Different kinds of cancer treatments cost more and some less, and every person is different in their treatment. The average cost for cancer treatment in 2024 is around $150,000 per patient annually. This figure encompasses treatments like chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and medications. Typically, insurance might cover around 70 to 90% of the total cost of cancer treatment, assuming the patient is within network and all treatments are covered under the policy. But most patients, if not all, should expect to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000 out of pocket annually for cancer treatment, including the deductible, copays, coinsurance, and any non-covered treatments or expenses. Now consider this. According to a study by Synchrony, released in 2022, the average insured American adult with employer-sponsored health insurance could spend more than $320,000 over their adult lifetime on healthcare costs. This includes both premiums and out-of-pocket expenses. Given that approximately 92% of the U.S. population had health insurance coverage for all or part of 2023, the math bears out that over the lifetimes of those American adults, the health insurance industry, and through them Big Pharma, extracts over $98.035 trillion from the insured. And if they only pay 90% of the patient's costs, they make $9.8 trillion over the course of an American generation. If they can only pay out 70% of the expenses incurred, they make $68.624 trillion during that same generation. So you can see the incentive for health insurance companies to delay, deny, and defend. Again, I'm not defending the person who took Brian Thompson's life. I will restate this with all seriousness and sincerity. I hope he is apprehended, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and adjudicated by a jury of his peers. But, and this should be taken existentially, if the shooter lost a child, a spouse, or a parent, hell, even a close friend, because a health insurance company delayed the claims process in hopes the claimant would settle for less or reject the claim, or any of the necessary medication or medical procedures needed for survival because of a loophole, or ended up litigating a claim to outlast or outspend the policyholders so they wouldn't have to pay out on the claim, well, I can clearly see how that person's hopelessness, frustration, and anxiety would have motivated him to do something, especially when we're talking about lifetime profits in the $9.8 trillion and $68.6 trillion range. This is the hope of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Trump 2.0 administration represents. Is it too much for one person to tackle in one 4-year stint? Honestly, yes. The deep state bureaucratic behemoth that is the healthcare industry, to include Big Pharma here in the United States, will take generations to tame and reform. But damn it, it's a start. If Kennedy, Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy can work together to set in place the basis for the continued refinement and reform of the healthcare industrial complex so that it serves the American people rather than creating billionaires and placing every other country's people before ours, we will be recharted in the right direction. Just my 2 cents, but the first things that should happen are to mandate over state line portability for all insurance policies, restrict Big Pharma from the duplicitous pricing of medications between nations, eliminate enrollment periods for health insurance, and last, but certainly not least, unpackage health insurance plans to make them a la carte so that only age and gender-appropriate treatments are covered in anyone's plan. Oh, and get the federal government, and state governments for that matter, out of bed with health insurance companies and Big Pharma. The federal government has proven itself an abstract failure in all things private sector related, especially in aspects of healthcare. The sooner we get that gaggle of self-enriching assholes out of the healthcare process, the better. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL, AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Our federal government has been co-opted by the globalist sycophants of the deep state bureaucracy. At every turn, this bureaucracy expands its power over both the American people and the states in which they live. The framers knew corruptible men would one day bastardize their elected authorities and attempt to centralize government in Washington, D.C. That's why they gave us the 9th and 10th Amendments. That's why they left standing the tool of nullification. In his book, Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government, Frank Salvato lays out how states can claw back their constitutionally mandated powers from the overreach of the federal government, doing so in a manner that prevents a second bloody civil war. Get your copy of Nullification, The Case for Decentralizing the Federal Government. Available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, Frank, what a story and what a terrible tragedy that happened in Midtown Manhattan on Wednesday. We know a little bit more about this gunman, at least what he looks like at this point. We know the kind of gun he used. We know that there was a burner phone involved, and he went to Starbucks, and they might pull DNA off the water bottle he threw in the trash. But it's quite just an extraordinary, tragic story.
Yeah, and we also know he was smiling.
Yep.
On the surveillance footage, so that's a little interesting right there. Yeah, it is a tragic story. Obviously this person, Brian Thompson, I believe his name was hunted down by this guy purposefully, and that in and of itself is disturbing. The fact that his occupation plays into it means that this guy was trying to make a statement.
Right.
No.
And the bullets that were left behind with those words, depose, deny, defend, may be some indication that there's something to do here with a denial of a claim, perhaps.
Absolutely. That's the title of a book that was all about the insurance industry, the health insurance industry in particular, and how they deny and delay and defend, litigate claims, and then what you can do about it. The book was substantial when it came to that kind of an information. So for him to have taken the time to have etched that onto the bullet casings, it says it's a message. Now, is it a good message? No. It's never a good thing when if you want to make a protest about health insurance, I'm all with you. I'm all with you. That entire industry is just insane. The hoops that have been made for the average person to have to jump through, the insurance company's ability to deny claims that are legitimate, to drag out claims so that you'll settle for less, to litigate so that you can't actually afford to continue taking them to court when they deny you. That's all of those tactics in a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry, if not trillion-dollar-a-year industry, is infuriating. But you don't do it that way. You don't take it into your own hands where you assassinate somebody, because that's what this, they're going to call it a murder, but the fact is this guy was assassinated for what he did for a living.
Exactly. And so hopefully they'll start to zoom in on who this person is, and with all of the trail that he literally left behind, because at first, when you first saw the story, it's like, well, this could be a professional hit. We don't know what's going on. But as you get more and more of these pieces of the story, it looks like somebody who's not a professional at all.
Yeah, there's enough pros in New York that if this was a hit, if this was a paid for professional hit, they wouldn't have been seen on the cameras. You definitely wouldn't have seen his face, and the gun wouldn't have jammed like it did.
Right. Exactly.
Everybody's seen enough episodes of The Sopranos to know exactly what a professional hit kind of looks like. Things do happen in New York in the streets. You've seen mob bosses get it outside of steakhouses there, and we don't know who did it.
Right.
That said, if they could track down everybody from January 6th and persecute them, they should be able to find this guy in New York with security cameras all over the place.
Yeah. Touché. That's exactly it. And of course, hopefully that this manhunt will come to a conclusion here very quickly. But also, too, Frank, we're waiting on the Daniel Penny jury. And in your experience in the fire service, I'm sure that you've rolled up on incidents where there has been a good Samaritan and so forth. This is exactly what Daniel Penny was trying to be that day.
Well, I've got to say this about this case. It's more a referendum on the people of New York and the 12 people on that jury than it is about what happened on that subway car. Mm-hmm. Because when someone steps in to try to protect people and all of a sudden they find themselves on trial with their freedom hanging in the balance, perhaps even their life, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You should get a medal as far as I'm concerned. So if the people of New York, under the prosecution of the DA in New York, successfully persecute this guy for coming to the aid of complete strangers in trying to protect them against this maniac who had a rap sheet the size of my arm, then the people of New York have gone insane.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. And I think the way you put it, it's a referendum on the people of New York. It really is, because I can't imagine if that's your loved one on the train and someone who's an ex-Marine, for example, and can take real action to actually save them or keep them out of harm's way, you would want them to do that at all costs. And
I'm guarantee you right now, race is a big part of this. If Daniel Penny was a black man, we wouldn't be hearing this today.
Frank, there's a lot of things happening with these nominations. For one thing, but the Pete Hegseth nomination has run into some pretty rocky roads here. But Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, seems to be reaffirming his support for Hegseth to lead the Pentagon. But Governor DeSantis' name has also been floated. What do you make of all this?
Well, you can't be supporting someone out of one side of your mouth and naming his replacement on the other.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's just a thing. Regardless of that reality, this is what can happen when 6 rhinos decide that they're going to take into their own hands the agenda for the entire country and administration going forward. If Republicans don't actually vote like Democrats do, and what I mean by that is they need to support Trump's agenda. If we're going to get this reformist, let's kill the deep state, break apart the bureaucracy done, if we're going to get that agenda done, or at least started under Donald Trump, people like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins and Mitch McConnell, they can't be doing this. They can't be saying, you know what, he wants him, and I understand why he wants him. He wants to dismantle the DEI that's just rampant like cancer through the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to confirm him or not. I've heard some stories that I don't have time to actually figure out whether they're true or not, but I don't like the way it looks, so I'm just not going to vote for him. I can't support him. Mark my words, that kind of BS is going to happen again and again and again at the hands of these 6, of the rhinos in the U.S. Senate. And this is why elections are so damn important. Mm-hmm. This is why down-ticket races were so important. This is why for the last at least 8 years, I've been screaming that you've got to get rid of Mitch McConnell. Because this power-hungry Chinese tool, and that's exactly what he is going to sit at the back bench, even though he said he's stepping down from leadership and pull puppet strings. And John Thune is his puppet. And Thune is one of the 6. So we've got the Senate, we've got the House, but if the Senate keeps standing in the way of every single thing that Donald Trump wants to do and every appointment he wants to make, then what was the use of fighting to win this election? Think about how they could destroy the chances for any Supreme Court pick that Donald Trump has.
You're exactly right about that. And one of the things Vivek Ramaswamy was talking about with the Doge was that Donald Trump wanted to do something different, because you're doing the same thing over and over again, you get the same results. So in that context, that's why this Doge with him and Elon Musk is so important, because they expect to have now a different result because they'll do something differently. But that's what I think Hegseth represents in all of this, as you rightly described. He's supposed to dismantle all this stuff, especially the DEI, and concentrate on war fighting. And the term that was used was lethality. I mean, otherwise our military is going to not be ready to do exactly what we need it to do when we need them to do it.
Listen, I am all about the Constitution, so the Senate has a role in advising and consenting when it comes to appointments made by the president at the cabinet level. And that's a good thing, because as we saw with Biden, you just can't let the executive branch run wild. It doesn't work. It becomes this quasi monarchy that can be run by a Politburo when the people in charge, like Joe Biden, become mentally unstable. So you need to have that check and balance. That's one of the brilliant things about our government, is that we have these checks and balances. Mm-hmm. But when the people in one branch are doing it simply to exercise political power, to say, well, you know what, we get rich off this stuff. You know, we entered public office, of modest means, and now we're multi millionaires because, well, we've had the inside seats of power, and we don't like that somebody's calling calling skullduggery on that. We want the status quo to remain. It's not what the people want, and it's not what our government is supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, if the Senate would have remained the way it was, the way the Constitution said it was supposed to be, with the state legislatures appointing the senators rather than direct elections, which was a progressive thing, they had to push through direct election of senators, the people of the states could be lobbying their state legislatures to recall these senators because they're not doing what's in the best interest of the states. But we don't have that luxury anymore because progressives, we have to vote. Where everybody's got to be able to pick their senators. It's not the way our country was set up, and that was the first step to 1,000 years of darkness.
Well, what you're talking about sort of leads into what my next question was going to be, and that is, short of their terms ending and them getting primaried and voted out of office at some point, what can be done right now in terms of, I know Trump can probably try to do arm twisting or, he's a very popular incoming president at this point, but what are the options to try to minimize what they're doing on their
recess appointments? It's controversial, but it has been done before. To make these recess appointments, that means that the Senate, that the whole of Congress would have to go into recess, and then the president has so much time to make his recess appointments to these posts. They become acting. He's the acting Secretary of Defense, but that's just a title. That's just an asterisk next to the name. Mm-hmm. And arm twisting, it can go both ways. Donald Trump could come in front of the mics and start arm twisting and pointing fingers and naming names about the people who are the obstructionists in the Republican Party in the Senate and start really ginning up public animosity towards these people, which they deserve, by the way. But that it doesn't do a lot for unity within the party at a time when the numbers in the House are slim. So you got to be careful with that kind of thing. Like I said, they deserve it for sure. But you've got a lot of squeamish people in the House who are more worried about getting reelected in 2 years than they are about doing the right thing at this point in time. So you got to be careful with that. But transformative change calls for measures that are sometimes ugly. So if it's got to be recess appointments, so be it. Just make sure your pick is worth that political capital.
Well, it seems to me too that just reforming the Pentagon, and the Department of Defense would be a full-time job all day long for anybody, any president. But this president, Frank, has to fight on so many different fronts, from national security, the border, inflation, wars going on, crime in the streets, and this kind of stuff. You name it. It would be overwhelming for anybody.
Well, that's why the people who are still drunk about the victory have to sober up quickly. This is not going to be a 4-year thing. We need to have at least 12 years of a reformative agenda in Washington just to get back to good. That's not even talking about correcting wrongs that have been in place for over the era since Obama. I mean, we've got a lot of work to do, so that's going to require at least 12 years, if not 16, and that means you better start thinking about who's going to keep carrying this torch into the future and who needs to go in the Senate in order to make it happen. So if you're still saying everything's going to be great because Donald Trump won, you better wake up because the work just started.
Well, Frank, we got the telephone lines lighting up. Would you like to take a quick phone call here this morning? Okay, sounds great. We've got what we like to call the honorary mayor of Clearwater calling in this morning. We've got Mike in Clearwater giving us a call. Good morning, Mike. You're on with Frank Silvato.
Hello, Kyle. Good morning, Frank. One quick thing before I get to my main point. People in New York have to understand if they find this man guilty, nobody's going to help you if you're on the street and you're in a bind because people are going to say, well, it's not my business. I'm not going to jail. I feel terrible for this lady or this man who's being raped or pummeled or what, but I'm just not going to get involved. And if that's what they want, hey, more power to them. But more importantly, what I called about, you know, Frank, I grew up in Korea. My dad worked for DOD. He was a GS-16, and he was sent over there to do things that I guess I'm not supposed to know what he did because he never told me one thing. But, you know, I remember air raids, you know, the sirens would go off and you'd have to find a place to run inside. See, people in the U.S. have no idea what that is because we haven't had to do it since like the early 60s, right, with Kennedy and the whole duck and cover and get under your What do you make of the martial law that this president declared for whatever reason? And, oh, by the way, his advisor who told him to do that just happened to resign. So now he's in trouble, the advisor's in trouble, and the whole government is going down the tubes. What do you have to say, Frank? Thanks you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Mike. I appreciate the call. Yeah, what do you think, Frank?
Well, you know, it is the inner workings of somebody else's government. You know, if we wanted to start criticizing the government of South Korea, then we should be just as concerned with the government of France at this moment. You know, they are much more integral to what happens over in Europe than South Korea is in that sphere. But you know, international diplomacy is a game of chess, 3-tiered, and you have to know how to play it. So when you have these democracies, and you know, we're not a pure democracy here in the United States. We're a constitutional republic. That's the big difference, and the left likes to try to blur that at times. Mm-hmm. But when you have these pure democracies, this is what happens when you can gin up animosity for a popular vote that is tantamount to mob rule. Sometimes you get people in there who don't do the right things and appoint the wrong people or trust the wrong people with advice roles. And quite frankly, this is what happened in a few instances during the first Trump administration. That's why he's going about doing what he's doing with his appointments this time around. He's not picking from the pool of the deep state. He's looking at people who are going to get the job done when it comes to having fidelity to the agenda. So, you know, South Korea, I don't know enough about exactly what's happening there with boots on the ground to speak intelligently on it. I have to talk about it generally. But to his first point about Daniel Penny, he's absolutely right, Mike. Mm-hmm. If this jury comes back with you're guilty, that city is turned into Gotham, and Batman's nowhere to be seen.
That's a really, that's a great way of putting that, because talk about lawlessness. People will say, do anything I want. Nobody cares. Nope. In fact, I'm protected here. Nobody can step in and do anything to me if I do crime or if I'm harming someone.
No, and that's why it's important to pay attention on who's running for district attorney and the prosecutor's offices. You know, those aren't the high profile things. When you run for that, you law and order. That's all you have to say. They played on the emotion about let's get Trump. So the people of New York screwed up once already. Now they have people in charge of prosecutions of criminals who selectively prosecute and then try to make social justice statements with how they do it. That's not what justice is supposed to be. You know, the blind justice is supposed to be blind for a reason. You're supposed to look at the law, and was the law broken? Then it's up to the jury to decide, well, there's extenuating circumstances here. This man was trying to help people, and, his intent was not there. I can't convict him of first-degree murder. So, like I said, this is a referendum on the people of New York. If these 12 people who've been selected for this jury are ignorant enough to convict this man, then the people of New York have gone insane. They've gone insane.
Yeah.
There's no common sense left, and I don't know why it gets to hold this mantle of such importance in the American way of life, if not for only the economic aspect of New York. It's turned into a cesspool of idiocy, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the way they think about things. And let's just remember another thing, and I love throwing this out there because it really ticks people on the left off. The congressional contingent during the Declaration of Independence ratification from New York never voted for the Declaration of Independence. They abstained because they didn't have direction from their people back in the capital of New York to vote the way they should, because they were too scared about what would happen to the loyalists.
Oh,
so that's where they come from, man. So you know what? I wouldn't move to New York if you gave me Donald Trump's money, because, well, Letitia James would just take it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is really something. I guess, at some point, like Escape from New York, maybe we'll actually see Snake Plissken at some point. We don't know,
It really is ridiculous when all you can, if you're that narcissistic to think that you don't have to pay attention to the consequences down the road and things as serious as cases like this, then you don't take your freedom seriously, and you don't take your rights seriously, and you don't care about anybody else but yourself and your time and what's important to you. It's not the way a society works. You have to have compassion for your fellow man. Daniel Penny certainly did.
Yeah, he really did. Well, I think we have time. Just a quick telephone call. I think we've got John in Sarasota giving us a call this morning. Good morning, John. I think we have time just for a quick question, but thanks for calling this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Kyle. Real brief. Frank, how do you really feel? I have to agree with everything you said. You simplify things so perfectly. Yes, the people in New York are insane, but look at who is in charge of the city, the state, and the boroughs. They're all insane. There's no logic behind it. When people like you and I talk about it, we can't persuade these other people because they do not suffer the consequences that you're talking about as far as being in charge. And that's a big part of the problem. They're not held responsible. But when somebody else does something and steps up to the plate in a responsible manner, they persecute that individual.
Exactly. It truly is. It truly is.
And one last thing. I'm going to leave it on a good note. Politician and a lawyer with a briefcase can steal more money than 10 men with machine guns.
That's
well said.
That's the truth.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Hey, thank you, John. Thanks for the call. Take care.
Thank you, Frank.
Of course, John in Sarasota. Yeah, he's exactly right, Frank.
Yeah, that's a T-shirt right there. I mean, it's the truth in simple form. Yeah, I'll be watching exactly what happens up in New York because, like I said, while the media is talking about this being a jury verdict about Daniel Penny, this is really a referendum on the people of New York and whether they've gone completely off the rails or not. And that really should affect their stature in the eyes of other Americans.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is often laced into illicit drugs and used to make fake versions of prescription pills. You can't see it, taste it, or smell it. Suppliers mix fentanyl into their products because it's potent and cheap, and the dealer might not even know. Keep yourself and others safe by knowing the real deal on fentanyl. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com.
Nike is constantly political. Why? Cover. Congressional reports suspect Nike used forced labor in China. Religious minorities were ripped from their families, sterilized, sold to factories. Nike made shoes in those same areas. Congress tried to ban Nike's labor practices. Nike fought back with highly paid lobbyists. Rather than hiring Americans, Nike chose China. John Donahoe, Nike. Stop exploiting foreign labor. Serve your customers, not woke politicians.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It comes directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and fact-checkers of social media. And please understand, the top Substacks are chosen for AI-generated search engines based on the number of likes and paid subscriber comments. That shows engagement. Liking and commenting are always ways to show your support for our work. And as Christmas approaches, and the new year, please remember to talk politics, current events, and religion with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. You don't have to be caustic about it. Use facts and listen as much as you speak. Because when we have these conversations, we realize we have more in common than we have in difference, and that neuters the ability of the deep state globalists to divide us based on identity politics. They lose their power when we understand e pluribus unum. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no wokeism, no political correctness. My name is Frank Salvato.